Well, good afternoon, everyone. And once again, welcome to the monthly meeting of the Theosophical Society. And thank you once again to Hope Schultz, who's actually situated in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And she is recording this on Zoom for us. Today's subject is reincarnation and the spiritual evolution of humanity. So I have a few notes, not too many. I have a few slides to show you. So let's go ahead and we'll do all of this and try to just open it up, and everybody can help with your comments and I mean, discussion. In the old days before COVID, we used to come into this room and sit around a table together, about 10, 12 people. And I'm hoping that day will return. But right now, we're just trying to keep the door open, so to speak. But hopefully the day will come when once again, we can get more people here at the library. Last month, Hai, who's sitting to my right, gave me some material by Annie Besant. And I have a few notes on that we'll share during the program. And as I'm sure you all know, Annie Besant did a tremendous amount of teaching regarding the subject of reincarnation. Wrote books, articles, and of course was a tremendous orator. So we'll introduce some of that from her lectures, 4 lectures actually that she gave to the London Lodge of the Theosophical Society in 1919. This was at the culmination of World War I, the so-called Great War that would end them all, right? And so we'll introduce some of her material from those 4 lectures during the program. So to start out, let me just say in way of introduction that Theosophy postulates that the process of evolution takes place at 3 different levels: the monadic, the intellectual, and the physical. And so keep that in mind for discussion. And then let me read this quote. The whole order of nature evinces a progressive march towards a higher life. So in Theosophy, if you read the word nature, you can substitute for that word universe. And when we define universe in Theosophy, we define universe as multi-dimensional. And when we say 7 layers, we don't mean like the layers of Juniper's birthday cake on June 16th. No, wait a minute. Yeah, that's right. So it's not layers like a birthday cake, but 7 dimensions. And it's interesting to remember that the consciousness on each of these levels or dimensions of the universe is unique. The consciousness of each dimension is unique to that dimension. But we as humans, as microcosms of the macrocosm, we are of the nature of the universe. So whatever the laws or law of the universe is, that's also the the law or laws of what we as humans are. And, you know, I looked into a number of books and I was trying to find out, what does theosophy mean by humanity? In other words, what is humanity? Because you'll read in the Secret Doctrine that there are humanities in other worlds, other planets. I mean, it's just unbelievable, you know, statistically, you know, how many galaxies, how many stars there are in just the universe that we can see now. And I suppose I think it's next month that the new telescope, the James Webb, will be operational, and who knows what we're going to find. But we can basically just say that there are other humanities. And so the term monad, we have a slide. The human monad incarnates in a series of personalities. And all of us who have studied theosophy to any degree know that it's not the personality that reincarnates. It's the monad, it's the higher self. So that higher self, that archetype, is something that is there. And anyone who is serious about investigating the metaphysics of life will find that it is in fact possible to connect to that archetype, which is our higher self, our Atma Buddhi nature, the higher nature. So, but we need to make the effort to make that connection. And these are just some notes here on reincarnation. It says, reincarnation literally means to enter again to the flesh. It is the theory that after the death of the body, consciousness returns to life in a new physical form. In the theosophical tradition, a human soul can only reincarnate in a human body. Other traditions accept the possibility of reincarnation in an animal or plant. Other terms frequently used interchangeably with the word reincarnation are metempsychosis and transmigration. In Buddhism, and I know a lot of us in theosophy are very familiar with Buddhism, the preferred term in Buddhism is rebirth. Rather than reincarnation, they use the word rebirth. So the monad is that immortal part of man which reincarnates in the lower kingdoms and gradually progresses through them to man and then to the final goal, nirvana. So Blavatsky defined reincarnation or rebirth, the one universal doctrine which taught that the ego is born on this earth an innumerable number of times. And she goes on to say, you know, that it's been lost in Christianity, although if you go into esoteric Christianity, you will find the doctrine of reincarnation. So the entity that reincarnates is the higher ego, the monad, and not the personality. So the individual spiritual monad is like an actor who, although appearing in and personating every night a new character on stage, is ever the same man, is that which appears on earth throughout the cycle in new form. So there's another note on the monad. After the unconscious and universal dual monad, when we say dual monad, we're talking about the seventh and sixth principles, Atma and Buddhi. Buddhi really is like a upadi, a vehicle of Atma, the spirit. So the dual monad evolves through the lower kingdoms. It reaches the human. And here, as the monad gets in touch with manas, a Greek word for mind, it develops a consciousness that is able to function on the lower planes. I'm going to skip over some of these notes.
So John, this is fascinating. John,
yeah.
This is fascinating. Don't skip over too much.
All right, I'll go to the next slide.
Okay.
So what is the one law of the universe that affects all of us? Everything. It's karma. And this is just a little humor. We're on this journey, right? And here's a travel magazine. I don't know the price of the magazine. It's not on the slide. But anyway, it says January 2030, Volume 1. The Lords of Karma. So, people may reincarnate in very different social and financial conditions from one life to the next, according to the karma generated. The law of affinity acts through the inherent karmic impulse of the ego and governs its future existence. The social status of a being is the result of karma. The law being that like attracts like. So the being is drawn into the current, which the preponderating attractions coming over from the last birth make him assimilate. I think most of us are familiar with the word skandhas. The skandhas are waiting for us to come and reincarnate again. These skandhas are translated in English as tendencies. So the one who died a peasant may be reborn a king, and the dead king may next see the light in the tent of a peasant. So although in general terms there's a certain learning from one incarnation to the next, simply going through incarnations does not imply a growth of the soul. In fact, the more consciousness is attached to physical life, the faster it will reincarnate. And then there's the question, which is really quite an interesting question. What is the time, the interval between reincarnations? And we can go to the next slide. as we know, the two Mahatmas, especially one that were basically Blavatsky's mentors, teachers, were known as the Master, Lord of Wisdom, the Master Mahatma M and the Mahatma KH. And the Blavatsky's teacher KH, the Master KH, in one of the letters that were written describing, you know, the philosophy of theosophy, the metaphysics of theosophy. This is a quote, a direct quote. One life in each of the 7 root races. So the question was, you know, how many times do we reincarnate? So he gave this number, 777. And one life in each of the 7 root races. 7 lives in each of the 49 sub-races. So when we talk about the 7 root races, we break that down into sub-races, which last for thousands of years. And according to theosophical doctrine now, the 6th sub-race of the 5th root race is gradually coming into incarnation in Australia and in North America and so on. So to represent man's entire term upon our earth in this round and allowing an average for like 100 years for each lifetime, we find that whereas a given person has passed in all his lives upon our planet in this round, but 77,700 years, but he's been out of incarnation 922,300 years. So if we want to think in terms of space and time, it's really pretty hard to get a handle on it. So it's almost like you have to realize that in this dimension, you know, we relate to our life experience in terms of space and time. But when we get into other dimensions, we're talking about dimension of being, okay? And it's not a matter of a linear chronology. But it's interesting, you know, to try to think about the idea that we are connected to the evolution of a humanity, that the humanity is evolving. And we said it evolves on 3 different levels: the monadic or spiritual level, the intellectual level, and the physical. And in theosophy, we realize the physical has pretty much been achieved. I mean, in terms of, you know, how far we needed to go with that. And now there's a strong impulse, we know, intellectually. I believe Blavatsky wrote that the age of Pisces ended, about a century ago, around 1900. And then the age of Aquarius, which brings about, Aquarius is strongly related, to science and to the intellect. So the Theosophists were wanting to do whatever was possible to direct this intellectual evolution in spiritual, direction. So once again, it's karma which controls these things. It's karma. It's the law that ensures that the evolution will eventually find its mark. And then there's some material here looking back at past lives. And C.W. Leadbeater was a very trained clairvoyant, and he said that, in dreams, we can sometimes get a glimpse, of past lives. But go ahead to the next slide. You can see that the date was 2011 when Tim Boyd, who's, of course, our international president. Tim was from Chicago. I met him years ago when he was living in Chicago, but then he moved to India with his wife. His wife, I believe, is from Singapore. And so they live in India now, and Tim is now the international president. But he welcomed the Dalai Lama to the program and programs that were held in Chicago in 2011. And the Dalai Lama was born on July 6th. No, wait a minute, I'm sorry. The Dalai Lama is the 14th, but the 13th Dalai Lama died in 1933. And the 14th Dalai Lama is said to be a reincarnation. The 13th Dalai Lama was known as Thubten Gyatso, and he died in 1933. So the 14th Dalai Lama, who's known as Tenzin Gyatso, was born about 19 months later. So we can say that the Dalai Lama, the reincarnation of the previous Dalai Lama, was born 19 months after the 13th Dalai Lama died. Okay. So now we can go to that next slide. Now the question is about young children. If someone dies, a child at a very young age, when do they reincarnate? So according to the material that I looked at, children who die at a very, very young age, like say 3 years old, can theoretically reincarnate with the same mother. But once they get to be, most of these children, I think, were 10 or 11 years old. Once they get to be that age, it's not really possible because of what occurs between incarnations. You know, they've lived too long. If they're 10, 11 years old, there's not time, you know, for that cycle. But they will reincarnate quickly, but not into the same family. And of course, this is the great tragedy that we're all dealing with and watching on TV every day. So we can go to the next slide. So Annie Besant, and if you go into the archives of the Theosophical Society, either internationally or nationally, you'll find, you know, links to many of the articles. You'll find the books that Annie Besant wrote on reincarnation, and you know, transcripts, you know, of some of her talks. Of course, we don't have any recordings, but you know, Annie Besant was said to have been a tremendous orator. She was also, of course, a champion of social rights, and she was known for her role in the Indian National Congress during the struggle for Indian home rule, and for her support. She was known for her support of national education in India. And she was the international president of the Theosophical Society from 1907. The first president, Henry Alcott, as we know, he died 1907. Then Annie Besant was president from 1907 to 1933. So at the end of World War I, the war to end wars, the Great War, and so on, the fighting in the trenches in Europe, and you know, the sinking of the Lusitania, and the involvement of the United States, and the thousands and thousands of people who died in combat, you know, in that war. So at the end of the war, Annie Besant gave a series in London to the Theosophical Society there. She gave 4 lectures. And one of the interesting quotes that came out of the material is that war will gradually disappear with the higher evolution of mankind. So what other reason do we need to try to champion this effort to raise our common humanity spiritually, to raise it spiritually? It's doing very well intellectually. You know, pretty soon we're going to have cars that drive themselves, right? But to come to a recognition that we are all of the same life. I mean, we share the same humanity. We are the humanity of this planet. And that humanity has it has an obligation to raise itself up, you know, spiritually. So the Theosophical Society tries to make a bridge to the intellect from, we could say, the buddhi, which is the spiritual aspect, not only of each one of us, but the spiritual aspect of our humanity, which is the sixth principle, the buddhi. So she talks about the six sub-rays, and she says that the sixth sub-race, which we mentioned is now incarnating, will take humanity one step further in its evolution toward perfection. There's a quote here on evolution. The whole order of nature evinces a progressive march towards a higher life. I think I read that earlier, but I'll read it again. The whole order of nature evinces a progressive march towards a higher life. She said, Annie Besant said, the keynote, first of all, she goes into the earlier sub-races, the Persian, the Egyptian, and so on and so on. But the keynote of the sixth sub-race is union. The union, for example, of different nationalities and classes. And, we realize, that what has been happening in this part of the world has been, like a melting pot. All the people from all over the world have been coming to North America, going to universities together. And some of the best minds in the world have been coming and working and studying together and working for different, corporations and so on, but working together. So we're going to make, this material available on our website if anyone, wants to get into it, because it is available. The 4 lectures, the transcripts are available in PDF on the internet. So anyone who wants to read, obviously we don't have time, to cover all of this, in one meeting here. But let's see if we go to the next slide. Leadbeater said that we can have a glimpse, perhaps, of a former incarnation in a dream. Well, I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little dreams that, I dream every night. But there's only one dream that I had that I would call a big dream. And I was in World War II. I was in uniform. I was in a C-47 like this. And we were going down. Our plane had been hit. And we were all going to die. We knew we were all going to die together. And for whatever reason, I was standing up in the C-47 holding on. And I'm looking at all these guys, and I'm just trying to let them know that it's going to be okay. And it was an extremely vivid dream that I have never, ever forgotten. So I just wanted to share. We can go to the next slide. Most of us are familiar with the golden stairs, and John Algeo did a wonderful presentation on the golden stairs that's available online. Theosophy.world is a wonderful reference, for all of our groups throughout the 70 countries where we have theosophical groups. And this website, theosophy.world, is a resource available, to all the groups and to all the individual, members. And if you want to, if you're not a member, it's $6 a month to be a member of the Theosophical Society if you're not formally a member, but it's $6 a month. But anyway, The Golden Stairs was not written by John Algeo. The Golden Stairs was not written by H.P. Blavatsky. The Golden Stairs was penned by one of her teachers, one of the Mahatmas. And you must be tired of listening to me. You want to read these?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, just read these.
Okay.
All right, Greg's going to read. I'm losing my voice.
All right. The Golden Stairs. A clean life, an open mind, a pure heart, an eager intellect, an unveiled spiritual perception, a brotherliness for all, a readiness to give and receive advice and instruction, a loyal sense of duty to the teacher, a willing obedience to the behests of truth. Once we have placed our confidence in and believe that teacher to be in possession of it, a courageous endurance of personal injustice, a brave declaration of principles, a valiant defense of those who are unjustly attacked, and a constant eye to the ideal of human progression and perfection which the secret science depicts. These are the golden stairs, up the steps of which the learner may climb to the temple of divine wisdom.
Well, the final step is the one that we want to highlight relative to our topic today. And a constant eye to the ideal of human progression and perfection, which the secret science depicts. That's the final step. So this will be available on the website, and I would recommend that you read the talk by John Algeo, the transcript of the talk that he gave on the on the Golden Stairs. We can go to the next slide. I've used this slide before. I'll just give you a minute to read it. And the next slide. So we can leave that one up. So that's the last slide. And we want to open it up now for discussion. I'm losing my voice. So Hope, would you go ahead and try to moderate the discussion?
Sure. So first I wanted to say to you, John, that I've probably said this before, but you are such an excellent teacher. That's why I like to have these recorded, because you will say very complex things, and then you'll put this aside that you'll just say, oh, and that means da-da-da. Then I go, oh, because you keep us with you, even though you're presenting something in another language or complicated. And I think you have a natural talent for that. And I've told you before, you are a treasure. So I'm very happy to record these, and we'll have them on our YouTube channel and also on the New Orleans Theosophical website. I will edit it. So I'm curious if anyone else is aware of having a dream that stands out. You know, my feeling is, John, that is the past life clearance dream. So that trauma gets cleared and comes forward in a dream in this lifetime, because you get to wake up still alive. That's kind of how the past life dream coming through into it. You know, like I call it a breakthrough dream, where it's breaking into this lifetime, but it's really about releasing that lifetime ending. And people do past life regressions to do that, but we also have that in dreams. And I'm curious if anyone else has a dream like that, if they'd be willing to share it. Or other thoughts about where you feel your past lives have broken through into your current awareness. Yeah, go ahead.
I have, quite a few years ago now, it's probably been about maybe over 15 years, certainly over 15 years, maybe closer to 20. I saw in Minneapolis, I saw a group of people doing a Japanese sword demonstration called the Iaido. And I had never, other than movies, never thought of samurai, never collected Japanese artifacts or anything in my home. And I was like, my jaw, it took my breath away, and I don't know why. And this was as many years ago, so many years ago. I remember everyone who was there. It was a big group. I remember what they were wearing, what they did. And like I said, never thought of it. And I was completely entranced. So, fast forward, I don't know, about 7 years later, I too started practicing with that group. And I still don't remember. I don't have a conscious memory of a lifetime with that. Someone I know, I told about it, can see them. And she goes, "Can't you see the temple that you were in?" And I'm like, "No, I can't." But I kind of joke that I'm a 56-year-old samurai woman in the United States, which is just so odd. And it's not what I would be drawn to, but it's been probably the biggest spiritual practice of my life. And I still don't collect artifacts. I still don't do any of that. And why I'm born now and with a certain amount of, skill, I have been practicing it now for quite a few years now, and I've reached a certain level, but it's not something I would have understood consciously unless I had actually seen people demonstrate it. And it touched me to my being, to my core. And it's still resonating today, 20 or that many years later.
Thank you. Cool.
Yeah, I've had a few dreams myself where I know I'm a painter in a couple of them. And one of them, it was very, very vivid and clear. I was painting a portrait for what seemed like a royal family. I remember seeing the mother, several children, painting on a very large canvas. And, everything was natural light, no artificial light in this huge room. I've had a couple of dreams of myself painting or seeing, very gigantic paintings that I think I get the feeling that I've done them in a past life. Have no absolute talent for it now today. No painting talent. But no, I try to doodle occasionally and everything. It's something I would love to unlock today. But yeah, I've always been fascinated with painting and art.
So I'm curious, you said you have seen some pictures that you think you maybe, or portraits, or whatever you call that, art,
Yeah.
that you think that you actually painted. Do you know the name of the person? Do you remember? Just curious.
No, I don't have any specifics or anything. No. I mean, some of the paintings kind of resemble some that you would see. I mean, I know you're not local, but at the New Orleans Museum of Art, there's a pretty good collection of Dutch, I think Dutch like Renaissance paintings. And yeah, I've always been very strongly attracted to that section of the museum and that style of painting. So who knows?
Bert, I bet you'd be able to name.
I was
some.
just wondering if you were one of the Van Eycks or someone like that, because they would paint royalty.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I've never really researched it or anything. I would think it probably took place during the 16th, 17th century,
Oh,
if I had to guess.
Have you ever had an opportunity to travel to Amsterdam?
No,
Not yet.
I would love to though, one day, yeah.
How old are you now?
35.
You got time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
oh, so I just looked up some Dutch painters. I mean, Rembrandt, Johannes Vermeer, Frans Hals. There's a lot of real famous Dutch painters from that period.
Right. Yeah. And I think that had to do with the economy back then, that I think it allowed for a lot of painters to be able to, take that on as their career at that time. Yeah. So who knows?
Yep, and they were sponsored by royalty as well. Because
Right. Yeah.
as the empire of the Netherlands, that Dutch empire expanded at that time period.
Right. Yeah. I actually have a grandmother from the Netherlands. I never met her, but yeah, on my dad's side. So
Interesting.
very fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the genetic connection too.
Right. Yeah, I think so.
Mm. I have met quite a number of people who kind of horrifyingly remember being in the concentration camps and being killed. I think there's a lot of Americans who incarnated almost immediately from World War II, or set their sights anyway on being in the United States, away from the European, in quotes, threats or wars after World War II. And I know that I died in about 1940 something in World War II, very vivid. And I died in Holland. I died, I think, off the streets of Amsterdam, perhaps. And when I went back to Amsterdam, I knew that I had walked the streets, and I had a really strong memory flashback when I went into a church just to cool off because it was cooler and there wasn't air conditioning, and the church itself was cooler, and we just sat there to sit down, and it was open and no services. I'm pretty sure it was Catholic. I'm not Catholic, but they let you come in anyway. So we just sat there in a while, and then all of a sudden when I am interfacing with a past life, the light changes around me in the room, and I stop seeing. For a second, I get a flash, and I stop seeing what is happening in the now, and I see what was happening then. And I saw it was Catholic. It's still Catholic. It was Catholic. And I saw a funeral happening, and I was in the audience. And I just scared myself and came back to the here and now and just said to my husband, I was just at a funeral from my past life. And he just takes like, oh yeah, that's all. She just has those moments, And it's not heat stroke. It's just like I felt this burning passion to get back to Amsterdam in this lifetime. Always wanted to go to that region of the Netherlands. And I was drawn by the tulips, but then I just had to walk the streets, and I could feel that I was, in these European countries, it's old enough that I could feel, and of course that's not even that long ago, but I could feel the lifetimes of being drawn back to that city. I don't know why. And I wasn't Dutch. I was there for the war in a capacity as a nurse for the Red Cross. So I have a lot that I know about that life. And I think when there's something so dramatic in our previous life, like something like a world war that we died in, that we have more access. My theory is we have more access to those memories, most partly because they're chronologically closer, but also because leading up to death, there's been a lot of trauma experiences, and because there's a consciousness on the planet at the time that is pretty extraordinary in that location. That's just my theory.
Hope, it's so interesting that you say that, because the first time I ever, years and years ago, I did a past life regression, and I don't know if you remember Craig Lang, but he moved a group of us through it, and I had never done such a thing before, and this was quite a few years ago now, and I just happened upon this life where I was I don't know, it had to be in Europe, possibly, I want to say Berlin, maybe even, but I was a drag performer. And it was not a glamorous life. It was a really sad life. And and I remember this was during the first pass, but the end to this person was just a group of men beat him to death. And so I just thought, well, that's interesting. Like how, and I can, but now after that, I can still see that life. And it was a very hard and sad life. It was, I mean, it sounds glamorous or at least fun and campy. And it was that when he was performing. It was that for that moment, but it wasn't. And so that was my first, but you say about the trauma of that's the first past life that I ever had a regression with, that I ever saw. And that ending was traumatic.
And one of the other notes that I came across was the fact that Blavatsky's teachers, the masters of the wisdom, have the ability to see the past lives of anybody. But when they were questioned about it, they're very reluctant to talk about it. And they, her principal teacher was Kutumi, KH for short, Kutumi. And his response to AP Senate was, I do, have the ability, to do that, but I do not like to exercise it. And what he said to Senate was, wouldn't it be, better to study, your present personality, rather than attempt to learn anything about its predecessor. So, and I think, when we listen to Krishnamurti, and I used to attend his talks in Ojai, and he would always try to bring the person asking the question back to the now, what's going on now? I mean, try to focus on where you are now. And but it is interesting, and another thought as y'all were talking that came to my mind was that I've read, where if you have a really strong bond with someone, it's very possible that you've either been with that person sometime before, or very possibly, as we say, the future, whatever we mean by the future in this dimension, right? That you would reincarnate again. Perhaps in the same family or that idea. We've all read about that, right?
I wanted to make a comment. You talked about that, the interdimensionality, and that the monad is present and aware and conscious of, so the higher self is conscious always of the interdimensional life. So we are here, and our personality is aware of the 3D of our present here and now, and we're here to refine that personality in the experiences of the here and now. Meanwhile, our higher self is aware of all of it. And some people, rarely though, but some people come in. So when we come down through the veils and we incarnate and we cycle in and go into the density, go darker and deeper into the density of this lifetime, we go into forgetfulness. And there are some people who have continuity of consciousness where they don't forget their past lives. And I think also that's why they're able to see other people's lives, all the, many, many aspects of that person's experiences, not just their current personality. And, it's pretty rare, but weirdly enough, I know 2 people who have that experience completely. And they both are reluctant to tell people about their past lives.
Yeah. I worked with Dora Kuntz for 3 years, and she was a very, very, gifted clairvoyant. And when she was a young girl, she lived in Australia, and she was trained by C.W. Leadbeater, who was internationally recognized in the theosophical world, as a very gifted, very trained clairvoyant. And so he worked with her. And during the war, there were so many families, widows, who were writing letters to him, asking him to please, my husband was killed, in the battle of such and such. Can you please look in on him, in the other world, right? And he was doing that. And finally, it got to be so much that he delegated a lot of that work or service to Dora. And, later on, she married Fritz Kuntz, and they moved, of course, to New York, and she eventually ended up, I think for 12 years, as the national president of the Theosophical Society. And she was very, very involved with spiritual healing and therapeutic touch, working with nurses and doctors, using her clairvoyance, and on and on. And I was fortunate, that I got to participate in some of those groups. But in fact, she and Dr. Karagula initiated a program known as therapeutic touch, where they you put your hands within inches of the person, and it's a technique that's used in hospitals today by many nurses. But she would talk about, other life forms other than human. She would talk about, when a horrible thing happens, that happened recently in Texas with those children. A swarm of angelic beings descend on that situation and are there to help those children as they, make the transition, because it's a process of transition. And these angelic beings are there to assist, with that transition.
I always appreciate having a talk about past lives, because it's always fascinating to hear what people are aware of. And I think in the future there will be less of a veil, and that hopefully is as much as the monk said that we should be focusing on the here and now, I still feel like the veil is thinner and those other lives are part of our learning.
Yeah.
So it's it's a broader learning to be aware of those other lives experiences, not just death, but more than just that time period. And also, I think children now are bringing forth their abilities from other lifetimes. It's more accessible to them because there's the 5-year-old who's playing advanced Mozart with skill that I've sent out to people, and there's artists, and I just think that the new kids benefiting from the thinning of the veil and able to access it physically in a way that our generations couldn't.
Yeah. Well, my hope is that the sixth subrace is going to bring into incarnation, souls who have gone on further. And the sixth subrace is the precursor, of course, to the sixth root race. Our fifth root race is strongly manas, or intellectual, the fifth root race. And we're in we're in the fifth subrace of the fifth root race. But the sixth subrace will be the precursor to the sixth root race, which is associated with the sixth principle, which is buddhi. And buddhi is the upadi, the vehicle for the seventh principle, which is, spirit or Atman. So, hopefully there will be more sixth subrace souls incarnating, because we certainly need it. I mean, there's so much craziness, going on in the world. And, you've got these two forces, and I mean, it's just, the word is, it's like instinctive, in humanity to be free. And I mean, that is an underlying esoteric driving force, is toward freedom. In the East, they like to use the word enlightenment or moksha, but liberation. And so, in other words, there is something that's driving humanity toward ultimately perfection, which, according to secret doctrine, that nirvana, that final nirvana, is at the end of 7 rounds and 7 root races, and the 7 sub-races of the 7th root race. Once again, the 777, which is a great number.
Would you be willing to talk about the root race stuff? Because you have a grasp of it, and I would really be interested in that laid out. I know that it might be a pretty difficult topic to put onto a slideshow, but I would be fascinated by that.
Yeah.
I'm going to second that motion, because that's something that I always I don't have a grasp of it. Yeah, and I would appreciate at least some clarity, some more about it.
Yeah, I get lost in the weeds quickly with it, and I feel like you don't, John, and so I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah.
I vote for the next time.
Well, in one of Besant's lectures, she talked about slavery, and I talked about karma today. And you know, when you think about what happened historically, you know, with slavery, I mean, what tremendous karma. I mean, we basically shot ourselves in the foot.
Agreed.
And she talks about justice, and she talks about the law of brotherhood, and she talks about how we learn all of these lessons in war. And, you know, we learned, like in World War I, you know, nations were learning that they had to cooperate with each other to defeat, you know, this terrible force, you know, that was causing so much violence. And so nations had to come together, and we had to advance in many ways scientifically, and we see tremendous advancement today. So I think I'd like to just end, you know, with this last little quote here from Annie Besant, where she says, in her third lecture on equality, she says, in the heart of everyone, there resides and is slowly unfolding the seed of divinity, which has taken the outer form of man. I am not confining that divinity to the human form. There is but one life within the universe, and in that one life, all things inhere.
You can stop the recording. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. It was really, really excellent. And I really enjoyed it. I look forward to listening to the recording also. And thank everyone for your comments and participation. Really enjoyed the meeting.